Welcome back to another week of the Rev MD podcast. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about credentialing and a touch on negotiations. This has been a frequent question over the last few weeks, both within our own client base as well as our Facebook group. So I wanted to kind of go over the super duper basics with regards to this. I know that there are lots of different options when it comes to how to manage your credentialing. And so it's important to get a grasp of what you can expect, what the steps are, what things you need to pull together, how long is it going to take, can you negotiate, will you be successful at negotiations? And while some of this is state specific and also dependent on how hard you push, your specialty, what information you put together in a letter, I wanted to kind of share some of that basic stuff so that you are prepared when having to do this. Now, as always, I always recommend, both from our own clients as well as, anybody who's got a private practice, create a spreadsheet of every payer you've applied to, every payer you are participating with or even not participating with, and really outline every single one so that you understand when they may be up for renegotiation, and also have an understanding for your front desk to know who you're in network, who you're who you're out of network with, so that they can then use that to help inform the patients and also comply with the No Surprises Act. So as you guys know, we have a full service medical billing and coding company. So if you are out there trying to figure out, gosh, I'm not happy with my billing, I don't have metrics, we are happy to do a practice analysis of your metrics. Just reach out at info@nationalrevenueconsulting.com or head over to our website at nationalrevenueconsulting.com and contact us today. We also have a member of our team who does credentialing. We have a great team that if you are looking to do some credentialing or renegotiation, we are happy to help. All right, off to the podcast. So credentialing is probably one of the more annoying processes that occurs as you're trying to figure out and start a practice. And this is essentially the process of getting on insurance panels, right? So that if you are going to be in-network, you can accept patients on those networks as an in-network patient, and then they will pay you for that work, and then you can, if necessary, balance bill any of the patients. Now, this process does take a while. I would say a few years ago, we could round out and say 90 to 120 days. Sometimes this is taking 9 to 12 months, depending on the payer. So certainly recognize that this can take a while. And each application is time consuming. Oftentimes you're submitting the application, potentially coming back and submitting more information. Maybe they have questions. Maybe they say they're not accepting new physicians. And so you have to appeal that decision. Basically, this is a full-time job trying to stay on top of this. So if you're opening a brand new practice, just be prepared that this is going to take some time. Now, we're going to talk about the several steps that are super important for you to get prepared for as you get ready to credential in your practice. So, of course, first thing is just understanding who do you plan to be in contract with, right? And credentialed with. And so getting a list of the top 10 payers, say in your state or your area, may be the best way to start, right? So of course, you don't have to get credentialed with every single payer, and you certainly don't have to get every single payer from the very, very beginning. So if you are opening your own company and your own practice and you're starting from the beginning, you may want to just say, okay, let's start with the top 10. And then as you start seeing additional patients and you start to get a feel for the payer mix in your area, you may decide to add on additional payers. Now, of course, please make sure that your front office staff know exactly who you are credentialed with, because then they can alert those patients that are out of network and make sure that they know that they'll have to pay an out-of-network fee or self-pay rate, and you do need to make sure that they've signed a form stating that with any sort of estimate of charges. Next is you're going to want to make sure that you have a CAQH profile set up, and that stands for the Council for Affordable Quality Healthcare, which is basically this database and basically holds a all of your credentialing information, which is then used by the insurance companies in order to get the information to determine how and when you're going to get credentialed. So now insurance companies will actually pay access for this, but this is a free service for you. So you can sign up for this, have that ready. And if somebody is doing your credentialing for you, they're going to need access to this in order to be able to manage your credentialing. Now, you are going to have to pull in a lot of information, and it does feel sort of annoying and to pull all of this together. But once you've got it set, then the credentialing team you've picked will be able to use that multiple times. So this is going to be things like your resume, your W-9, anything to do with your board certifications or diplomas, proof of malpractice. You're going to have to be able to show your DEA licenses or any other state medical licenses, and basically have that updated and in the correct format so that once you have all of that information pulled together, then your credentialing team or say a front office staff member can then sort of take it from there. You are also going to need 3 references, and that's going to be important to have those documented. It is also important to know that you will want to make sure that you don't have any gaps within your employment history. And if you do, you're going to have to explain what those gaps were for and make sure that if those gaps are prolonged, you may even have to show documentation of retraining. Granted, those gaps are usually pretty large when you have to do that. In addition, you're going to want to have to pull together all of the information regarding your practice, right? So this is going to be things like your tax ID number, your group MPI number, your individual MPI number, where your office location is going to be, your phone number, fax number, right? All the nitty gritty. And so if you do have all of that information organized beforehand, that's just going to make this easier. Now, there are different ways to credential, whether or not you want to do a group MPI or your individual MPI. I would just suggest that determining how many physicians or other practitioners you're going to have in your practice may determine what makes sense with regards to your group MPI or your individual MPI. So you'll want to have to figure out some of that nuanced before. Most of the practices that we have that have multiple physicians will use their group MPI, and then the individual physicians under it then are credentialed underneath the group MPI number. Then once you have all of that sorted, you've got your CAQH profile updated, then you basically will allow your credentialing team to be able to get into there. You grant access to them. You give them their, your login information, everything sorted so that the other team members can get in there and do it for you unless you're doing it for yourself, which totally can be the case as well. Just it's a lot of work if you're also trying to see patients. Then you're also going to want to grant access to the payers by signing and dating the attestation forms. And you're going to be wanting to recheck this profile frequently to make sure everything is up to date, which is typically in that 2 to 3 month range. Now, this again is kind of your part, and then you hand it over to the credentialing folks. Now, I will say that you're going to have to basically credential with each insurance company, which can take essentially 10 to 15 hours per payer. So this is a lot of going back and forth, getting the application put in there, putting information in there, making sure that they've submitted the application, sometimes following up with the company multiple times by the phone. And sometimes you'll get an appeal or a decision where the company or the insurance company is saying, hey, we're not accepting any new physicians. So then you have to do an appeal to state why your practice is important, why you're unique, what's the community like, why it's important for them to accept you into their network. And this is just more time consuming than anything. These appeals can be successful depending on the type of practice you have and the location that you have selected in terms of where your practice is. Now, I would never hesitate that if you are struggling to get in network, that you can ask to speak to the provider relations team, get a contact person at the company so that you can figure out who is going to be the person who can go to bat for you if there are problems with your application, so that you can try and get that expedited, or at least if you're trying to do an appeal, try and have someone on your side to help support that appeal. So again, always nice to have a friend in your corner. Now, again, like I said, this can take, 90 to 120 days, sometimes can take even longer than that. And so just be prepared that for some payers, this can take a really long time. And again, we talked about, if for some reason a insurance company is saying they're not going to accept you, that you can write an appeal letter and really outlining the nuances around your practice, your location, what you're going to do for patients and how you're going to be a good partner with the payer so that you can get in network. Now, once you've gotten through this credentialing, then you're going to have a small window of opportunity to negotiate reimbursement and terms with the insurance company. And this is kind of that contracting piece. But I'm just going to say that this can, some payers are better than others in terms of whether or not you can credential, but it's always worth a try. So when they send over contracts, they're going to send over a fee schedule that they propose, which is really going to give you the amount per CPT code that they're going to, be able to offer you in terms of payment. So always start here first, and then you're going to want to understand if the numbers make sense. Try and do any negotiations, and then go through the fine print of the contract to determine whether or not, you need to make any other changes, or at least try to make any changes. And your credentialing team can really guide you through reading some of those and understanding what makes sense to negotiate and what certain payers we're just never going to negotiate on. Make sure that you really understand what different plans are within that payer group, so that you have an understanding of what plans, one, that you're going to be credentialed with, and understanding any fee schedule differences between, say, an HMO or a PPO. And always ask before just assuming. And again, that contract representative is going to be a person that either you or your credentialing team can discuss with if there are questions. So again, you really want to make sure if it makes sense to be a network, it makes sense if this is going to be a payer that you want to contract with, and the fee schedules, and really kind of running the math around what they're going to pay you for certain CPTs, how long do those visits take, is really something you'll want to do. Because the last thing you want to do is get a network with them and then spend, a year or longer seeing patients where it's financially not viable. Just understand that the rate that they're giving you is going to be the rate that you're typically in network with for typically 3 years before you can renegotiate. And last but not least, if you are having a send-in letter in regards to negotiation, some of the things that you really want to outline, not only about you, right? So just basic information about you, where you're located, your patient bases, are you going to be credentialed with any hospitals? What board certifications do you have? Obviously, anything about your subspecialty, but really, anything that you plan to offer to patients is going to be important. Are you doing procedures? Are you doing RCM or CCM? Things that make your practice unique. And you're going to want to have this very organized, submitted clearly so that you can get those to the insurance representative. So then when they look at it, they know the full story. If you have been in practice for a while and you're now renegotiating your rates, you can talk about payer mix, patient volume on their panel. You can talk about how many long-standing patients you've had, really being able to talk about, your relationship with the community and how much you serve the community. And that's really just going to be another way for you to help explain why they should have you on their panel. And last but not least, I highly suggest, if you are able to do and afford a consultation or somebody to help out with this, people know how to do this very, very well. I know when I met with our credentialing team and really understood their process, it is very detailed. It is very time consuming, and having the information with somebody who knows what they're doing really is going to help you be more successful and faster than wasting time. So whether that's an office manager or somebody who has had previous experience managing these applications is really, really important. And again, typically this is going to be something that's separate from your billing service. So just recognize that even if you have a team of billers, they may or may not be the right people to do your credentialing. All right. I hope you guys have had a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you next week.